Shabbat Shalom. The most interesting thing to come out of last week's AIPAC conference, interestingly enough, was not so much what was said in any one session or another, but what was said before and after the sessions themselves. As with every election cycle, AIPAC invited the leading presidential candidates. To begin with, those of us who attended duly noted that of the 5 candidates, ironically, it was the only Jewish candidate who was a no-show at the annual pro-Israel affair. But far more hotly debated than that was the invitation to Donald Trump, whose scheduled appearance prompted many rabbis, my colleagues, to threaten a walkout due to his stances on minorities, women, immigration, and otherwise. Whatever his prescriptions for the American-Israel relationship may be, the thinking went, his positions on these issues marked him so far out of sync with Jewish values that rabbinic leadership cannot in good conscience countenance his remarks. Despite AIPAC's fears and the press's predictions of a contentious reception for Trump, what actually took place was just the opposite. As his remarks unfolded, the room quickly warmed to Trump's rhetoric. With a Verizon Center in his hand and seeing the opportunity, Trump disparaged the president to an approving and roaring applause and standing ovation. No matter your political leanings, whether you were there or not, the most interesting thing about it was what would come next. The following day, AIPAC's chair, Lily Pincus, shared a tearful and unprecedented public apology, stating her regret and dismay at this lack of civility. Pincus castigated the attendees. "We say," she said, unequivocally, "that we do not countenance ad hominem attacks, and we take great offense to those that are levied against the President of the United States from our stage." As I've shared with you many times, I've attended AIPAC conferences since I've been in college. And this is the first year that I can recall that the discussions have been about style, not about substance, about the behavior of the attendees, not about the speakers. There was, it would seem, a breach in protocol, in the rules of acceptable public discourse, not in middle America, some distant corner of the American heartland about which we know not. This happened right at the heart of the Jewish community, a coarse word, a reprimand, a slap on the wrist, a shanda brought about by a breakdown in civility within our community in the most public, most well-attended pocket of pro-Israel communal life. Ours is not the first age to experience political incivility. In a nation comprised of so many dissimilar interests and inclinations, a spirit of partisanship and heated political discourse has long been part and parcel to our nation's identity and arguably the foundation stone of our democracy. Our ability to house dissent, to debate, to disagree, even passionately so, is a right and freedom that's central to who we are. And yes, occasionally this messy business of partisan politics, competing agendas, and personal rivalries has devolved into name-calling, mudslinging, and even, as we know from history books and Broadway shows, duels to the death. In recent history, we only need to recall Lee Atwater's scathing attacks on Michael Dukakis or the Swift boat ads against Secretary of State Kerry to know that character assassination did not begin in the present presidential cycle. No matter our highest hopes, the political arena has not historically provided the breeding ground for the better angels of our nature. What does seem to be the case, and what does seem to be different from the past, is the confluence of factors, some new and some a hardening of pre-existent conditions, resulting in a coarsening of our public discourse, a polarization and unwillingness to compromise that threatens our ability to work together on matters of common cause. More than any other organization, it's been the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, who have studied, monitored, and educated America on the topic of civil discourse and combating hate and intolerance. And it'll be a great honor for our community to welcome its new executive, Jonathan Greenblatt, to Park Avenue this Tuesday evening to speak on the subject. But just prior to his retirement last year, Jonathan's predecessor at the ADL, Abe Foxman, penned a fascinating piece on the conditions that have brought about our present uncivil state of affairs. First and foremost, Foxman argues, is a new dynamic brought about by the internet and social media. Although we may have hoped that the proliferation of information would have produced a more egalitarian, truthful, and respectful discourse, a sort of sunlight is the best disinfectant theory of media, the internet unfortunately has had just the opposite effect. Broadcasting has given way to narrowcasting, as today one need only turn to the channels and websites that echoes one's previously held views without ever having to engage in that cumbersome task of engaging with ideas contrary to one's own. This closing of the American mind is aggravated by the fact that our new forms of media have done away with the checks and balances of traditional journalism. As Zeynep Tufekci wrote in the New York Times this week, there are no fact checkers in the Twitter sphere of presidential candidates. Falsehoods are shared and spread without any gatekeepers. In past generations, Tufekci explains, there existed boundaries on what could be publicly discussed, something called the Overton window, the range of politically acceptable conversations. Today, be it the screeds of the extremes, the conspiracy theories of the deeply paranoid, and the partial and full-fledged lies of the fear-mongering are spewed, posted, and shared without any reprisals or repercussions. Hand in hand with this new discourse, Foxman explains, have been other factors that serve to polarize our leaders and governing institutions. A process of residential sorting has emerged whereby conservatives and liberals have consolidated into different geographic, urban, and suburban areas. Congressional districts have been redesigned and redrawn in a manner that disincentivizes compromise. It is, after all, the candidates with a broad range of constituents who are more inclined to seek common ground and consensus, not the ones, increasing in number, who need only appeal to an ideological base and uniform constituency. Finally, Foxman writes, is the emergence of vast sums of money to support specific special interests. It is the outsized influence of donors who more often than not passionately exist on the ideological extremes that often prove to be, in the words of Richard Haas, merciless in their treatment of any politician who departs from their particular orthodox. The combination of all of these factors, undoubtedly amongst others, have brought about the conditions of our present discourse. It's a state of affairs not unique to America, be it Greece, the demise of the British Labour Party, the populist politics of Poland and Hungary, or the political climate in the state of Israel. One not need look far to see the effects of our age. The very fact that this week Prime Minister Netanyahu shamefully backed away from his commitment to religious pluralism due to the pressures of the religious right is but the most recent example of the cratering of Israel's political center. Here in America, the climate has produced a discourse of grievance and blame, whereby the identifiable shortcomings of our country are not countered with creative solutions and forward-thinking initiatives, but by a bitter game of who's to blame. The far left points the finger at Wall Street and big government. The far right blames immigrants, gay marriage, and those who would take guns away. The views of both sides are fiercely held, neither side prompted to compromise or sacrifice, each one talking past each other, and most sadly, the ills of our country left unaddressed. In just a few weeks, on April 19th, each of us will have the opportunity to vote in the New York State primary. I am told that due to the 501(c)(3) status of this institution, not to mention my desire to remain gainfully employed, I cannot endorse any candidate. What I can do is urge you to vote and get involved in the electoral process. By all accounts, New York is not a slam dunk for any candidate, and we dare not sit this one out. As New Yorkers, as a Jewish community, it's incumbent upon us to turn out in force and encourage others for April 19th. We need not look further than the hero of this week's Parsha, Aaron, Moses' brother and high priest, to see the leadership values of those deserving to be in high office. A person who, as Pirkei Avot teaches, is Ohev Shalom and Rodef Shalom, a lover of peace and pursuer of peace, a style of leadership built on politics of responsibility, not of blame, leaders with energetic solutions, not demonizing slogans, leaders seeking to build bridges, not walls. Most of all, in this era of incivility, our state, city, and nation should seek to elect those individuals who love more than they hate, who unite, not divide, who live in dogged pursuit of a mended world, and who insist that it's a responsibility of leaders, as our Parsha teaches, to enhance, not diminish, the divine presence in our shared humanity and world. The Babylonian Talmud records a famous debate on leadership. One rabbi, Rabbi Yehuda Nessia, argues that the character of a generation reflects that of its leaders. Other rabbis counter, saying the character of the leader reflects that of his or her generation. Either way, the point of the text seems to be that there's a symbiotic relationship between a generation and its leadership. Or to put it another way, we get the leaders we deserve. The blessing and curse of our age is there's been a flattening of discourse to the point whereby every person has the power and opportunity to participate and shape the debates of our time. We who seek and pursue peace, who stand ready to engage in the counterclaims of others and work to find common cause even with those with whom we disagree, must speak as loudly and as frequently as those ideologues who exist at the fringes. We dare not give in to the political pornography of our time. We have an obligation to shape the moral discourse in which we inhabit, an insistence on civility, a rhetoric of courtesy, and a willingness to compromise are values worth fighting for and worth defending. We are all stakeholders in the outcome. We will reap what we sow, and it will be our own efforts that will determine whether we get the leaders we deserve. Let us then think ourselves deserving of the very best. Let's act on those impulses and work to bring about a world befitting of our highest hopes for us, for our children, and for our grandchildren. Shabbat Shalom.